Why don't we do that? We're missing a couple of folks, but we're well within our quorum here. Okay, so we're all right. There's Senator Wassenberger. Now we're good on both houses. Yeah, let's go ahead and get
Mr.
back.
Chairman?
Yes.
This is Senator Wassenberg. Hey, I have a doctor's appointment. I caught a piece of hay in my eye at my son's ranch this week, and so I need to go get it taken out, and then I'll be right back. It's just up the street.
Well, PPE is very important in all of our activities, Senator Wassenberger. So there is no workspace that one shouldn't always have safety be first. So, all right. So now you know the ramifications of that. But,
Mr. Chairman, could we get Senator Wassenberger to do a safety share for us on that then?
a safety moment. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. So this afternoon, well, we do have our simply reports, very important reports to us, all driven by economic development. And so with that, we will begin with an update from the Wyoming Business Council, for which one of your new programs I had to take a call over the lunch hour for. So I think that's a good thing. So, Director Durrell, why don't you go ahead and kick things off for us.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. My pleasure to do so. I'm going to share my screen and we'll walk through a PowerPoint slideshow with information about what we're up to and what's going to be happening in the future as well. If you have questions as we go through this, please feel free to jump right in there. All right, can everyone see my screen? It should say agency update.
We can.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this is, in many ways, will look similar to a report we gave a while back, but it's going to be a little bit more detail and a little bit more has gone on in the last couple months. So we won't cover a ton of that, but we did in September timeframe, we did close the relief and mitigation funds. So you can see that here, and as the co-chair mentioned in his intro, that he took a call about the agriculture fund that launched on November 2nd. So this week already we've launched those funds. One thing I wanted to note though on this slide is that while we have been incredibly busy and happy to do so, we've been working on these business relief programs. We have also still been working on the normal things that the Business Council will do. And those include, SBIR grants, those include business ready community grants and loans. And we've done a number of those, a project in Grable, a project in Sheridan, as well as just yesterday, a project for the town of Evanston. A new manufacturer from Oregon is moving to town, and that was approved yesterday by the SLIB board. So some pretty exciting things have been going on in addition to the response to the COVID-19 public health crisis. When we take a look at these programs, the ones that are on your left have already been closed. That was, of course, the interruption fund, the relief fund, the mitigation fund. As legislators, you are very, very familiar with those. And thank you again for entrusting us with those programs. And we were happy to deliver those. We spent in total on those about $300 million, maybe just a tad over. I'm sure a few of you are doing the math right now on those. And then now we're working on the agriculture fund and the endurance fund. Both of those funds are similar in their calculations. The agriculture fund, of course, is for those producers of protein, crops, and fibers. And it's $90 million available, up to $250,000 per applicant. Opened this week, closes at the kind of the middle or so of next week, or excuse me, 2 weeks from a couple days ago. So 12 more days on that one. The endurance fund, same time frame, less money is available. That is the remainder of what was left in the $325 million that legislature provided us at the beginning of the summer for the relief programs. And so that is what we have available to us to date. There may be other opportunities to put money into that fund and utilize the monies that we have in other programs for that. But that is what we have to date. And I'll jump into some more of the results of those in future slides. Taking a look at some of the results, as you can see here, about 5,600 businesses and nonprofits received funding. That is for the first 3 programs. That does not count the agriculture or the endurance fund yet. This data does not include that. And as you can see, a little over 300 million was paid, and that supported about 33,000 full-time employees. So I think a really good, really good set of programs did what they were intended. And you could see by what was used up there, the need was definitely there. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the businesses, and then we can dive into the nonprofits in a similar way. So you can see here that the folks in that first interruption fund almost doubled what was originally allotted in that. The relief fund and the mitigation fund. So again, a great amount of money went out to 5,300 businesses there. Same type of thing. Now we took the nonprofit group and looked at those in a little bit different fashion. Remember, they were available they were eligible in the second and third programs, the relief fund and the mitigation fund. You can see it's broken out 236 of those C3, C6s, C12s, and C19s that had, in this case, that had 1 full-time employee or more. And that was the eligibility requirements that we came to. So you can see about 10.5, almost 11 million for those in the relief fund that were either not required to close or required to close, and then 3 million in the mitigation fund. And that was really all about keeping their employees and their customers safe with PPE and other methods of controlling COVID-19.
So, John, or Mr. Durrell, just a question on that. I thought there was a size requirement on that mitigation fund. How many nonprofits met that threshold for what was it, 100 plus employees?
No, sir. The mitigation fund did not have, it was not 100 and above. It just allowed more employees in. So you could have more employees than 100. The relief fund had a cap of 100 employees. So it was between 1 and 100. The mitigation fund allowed for businesses of any size to utilize that as long as they had 1 employee. And that was for those larger employers to utilize it as well. But great question.
Thank you.
You bet. Now, and this now includes it, and many of you will remember this slide from a previous presentation. One of the things that we were, I think, all concerned with is ensuring that the message got out to all of the communities and the counties around the state. And so we did a really aggressive amount of promotion through press releases, webinars, radio shows, information, and even advertising on social media as well as in newspapers in order to make sure that the towns around the state had an opportunity to take advantage of these. And so you can see here as we look at the distribution by county, the funds per capita are on the green bars, and the number of applications that were approved per 1,000 people in those counties are the brown dots. And so you can see that as you look across this pretty even split, except for Teton County, and we talked about that, their health restrictions were much more strict than the state health restrictions, and their industries tend to be hit harder, especially at the beginning of this, than others. And so that would account for the difference.
Mr. Durrell, again, is that also a little bit of a factor of cost of living? Although I don't see that correlation in some of the other counties, maybe.
We believe it does impact that a bit, and we know that the labor challenges there were that the labor shortages of lower priced labor, as well as having to fill those gaps with maybe a little bit higher priced labor, probably contributed to that as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, just so I'm understanding this graph, so the dots are the approved applicants, is that correct?
Applications, yes.
Applications, okay. And so the green lines is the dollar amounts, correct?
Yes, per capita in that
Per capita.
county. Yes.
So why or what is the disparaging amount of the space in between?
Yeah, a great question. And there's in a future slide, we'll even talk more about that because it even factors in more on industry. But let's cover that now. So what you can see is that if there's a discrepancy there, the number of applications, let's say there's a gap. Let's take Fremont County, for example. So if we look at Fremont County, there were more applications and maybe less funds per capita. That could relate to the types of industries that are served there, the types of losses that those folks incurred, that maybe their losses weren't as great. Like more businesses were impacted, but their losses weren't as great. Whereas you might see in a Hot Springs or a Converse, their losses were actually higher than the number of businesses that applied. Does that make sense? Great, thank you. So if there are other questions, I'll be happy to do that. This slide has a lot going on, so I'm happy to wait and talk about that if we need to. Okay, we'll jump to the next slide, and Representative Duncan's question can be seen here as well. I think you can see that in things like the personal care services, those are the hair salons, nail salons, barbershops. You can see that though there were a number of those impacted, but the dollar amount that was impacted and the fact that many of them are single just sole proprietors, you can see that there were a lot of applications for that, but the funds that were required were not that great. And that just correlates to the fact that, again, a lot of sole proprietors asking for a small amount to cover their losses. And then as those folks became able to work again, they were right back into, I think, back into a place where they were just as busy as they were before. So any questions on this? Again, these graphs I think, show a pretty good picture of what's happening and what's going on. Okay. To talk a little bit about this slide, I've brought Marcio Paez-Barreto, who is our project manager on this, as well as being our regional director in Lander, Wyoming. So I've brought him in to speak to this and talk a little bit about the process we're taking and some of the data about the applications. Marcio?
Yeah, Ms. Barreto, go ahead. This is your first time in front of the full committee, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'll just walk you through a little bit of the procedure, which I don't think we'll have an issue here today, but we run things through the chair, so that way the committee doesn't pepper you too hard. Please go ahead.
That's great. Thank you very much. So there were applications, the review process, and we tried to create some key success factors. How do we measure we are doing a good job? And we determined that due to crisis, speed was one of the key success factors. I'm going to talk about speed in a few minutes, but we also determined that security, both of the process and security of being a good stewards of the public funds, it was another key success factor. So we tried to balance both. And some of the applications were being reviewed in 3 to 5 days. But there were applications that got close to our upper limit that was 21 days. So that speedometer that Josh Dorrell has there, 71% of the applications took around 21 days or less. So, but that is just speaks of one of the key success factors, the speed. In terms of security, we built up a system that had many types of reviews. We start with what we call the auto review, that a computer system was checking data from the applicants that put in a form with known database that the business council had, the RIS has, and etc. After that information was validated by the computer, went to a semi-auto review because some folks put the wrong email or the wrong address. And then we had a group of people in the Wyoming Business Council checking manually, I would say semi-manually or semi-auto, the information in those forms with other databases. And then finally, we went to the manual review. In that manual review, we also had a help of the Secretary of State when we need to validate some information. And then after approval decline process, those applications that were approved for payment were sent to the state auditor's office, where they did a final review. So we had many checkpoints from systems that were automatic to semi-automatic to manual, and participation of both state auditor and also Secretary of State. And then finally, the checks were cut and sent to the address that were provided on those applications. We had two types of audits. One audit is as we are learning with the process and we start to get yellow flags. There are too many applications that look like this, or there are too many max requests, or there are some things that are concerned. We pull those applications out of the review queue and we did a more detailed audit. And with those audits, we either request more documents or we change the system. And then also we are running our applications now in what is this called a synthetic audit. It's a computer system that is looking for patterns that could tell us there are applications that pass all these layers of protection. And then also part of the system, last but not least, is the state auditor's office with the transparency website put all the applications that got paid there. So if there is a concerned citizen, it can call us or call other stakeholders in the state, report us process, and then we put that application back in audit and talk with other agencies, inclusive the DCI, to investigate if there was attempt to fraud or not. Is that cover what you want me to cover, Josh?
Yes, thank you, Marcio. Any questions on that process that we undertook? Again, balancing that speed and security for sure. And I will say efficiency as well, as our team is 36 folks working hard to make this all happen, along with the Secretary of State and the State Auditor's Office.
Mr. Durrell, what's your comfort level that you caught most of the fraud or attempted fraud?
Well, my comfort level will probably soon be either validated, or we'll find out that I need to rejudge that, because we'll do that audit. But my comfort level, we caught 7% of the applications that we took in, we declined for one reason or another. That makes me feel really good about the process that we took up to this point. And I think we will find those cases that, someone looks great on paper and maybe does not have the need that they thought that they suggested they did by their application. And we will see those. I think we don't have the ability to be on the ground in all 99 municipalities to make those determinations, but the audit afterwards will help that a bunch. So I feel very good about the process that we took, the consistency, how strict and stringent it was up to this point. And I think we will still be able to recover some of those funds and keep the process, really as solid as we could.
So, Mr. Durrell, how did that work with the state auditor's office? Did they make the payment? Did everyone have to go through that vendor process? And then you must have incorporated that into your application or something for it to move that quickly, or how did that work exactly?
Well, we did work closely with the state auditor's office from the get-go to make sure that we were sharing the correct information to make it as easy as possible. But I think what the reason it happened so quickly in many cases is because we worked closely to get the right data to start with. And we also got a lot of help from them. They were very, very helpful in assigning resources to us and making the process as smooth as possible. So, you know, without their coordination and their extra workforce that they provided us, it would have taken much more time to do.
Yep. All right. Committee? Questions? Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Well, all along the way, we also were able to help administer and drive the Connect Wyoming program. And you'll remember that that program is intended to help with telehealth, so the telemedicine and teleeducation during the pandemic, and also in our rural areas, of course. And so we took in a number of applications for different areas around the state that were unserved or underserved according to the FCC, what's called the FCC 477 map. Learned an awful lot about broadband, not just in the state, but also broadband, the way it works across the country. And during this process, we were able to award 34 contracts and utilize 56.5 million of the 100 million that was allotted for this program. And as you can see here, quite a bit of, we've made quite a dent in the broadband access across Wyoming. If I think about what Connect Wyoming is able to do, and that work is going on right now, it's in progress. We're getting you know, pictures of towers and seeing the invoices for the work coming in. As we're able to see the impact of this and what has become you know, really being able to connect these rural areas, it makes me feel really good knowing that so much of our state is rural, and so much, especially at a time like this, we're seeing how important that connection is in terms of education, in terms of health. And we, you know, as this backbone is built, we see such a great opportunity in terms of business creation and business growth for these areas.
So, Mr. Durrell, that's kind of one of my questions I want to ask. And I realize we're sort of, this is the high cost areas that we're getting to with this, you know, so it's, you know, it's over, what is it? That's over $5,000 a home. That's quite an investment. What do you see? What can we piggyback on that? What do you anticipate will be the additional benefits and maybe a little better return on those taxpayer dollars?
Yeah, that's you're absolutely right, and there's a reason that the private companies hadn't built out and really provided that level of service in these areas, and it's quite frankly that dollar amount per household, and recouping that cost over time, including maintenance, would be pretty much impossible, you know, with today's dollars. And so, you know, doing that, the way I look at that is going to prepare us to be much more friendly to remote workers. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when it comes. I think that the benefits of telehealth are only going to increase. And those folks who are in those very rural areas, the health side of the coin, which I'm probably not as familiar with, but is really important. And that's going to increase over time. I think we've seen a great demand for that, a great improvement in that, and that's only going to continue. So I see that. I also see that it's going to allow these areas to develop with a little bit greater population, perhaps those folks that want to move away from highly populated areas and still be able to work remotely in these areas that are just beautiful and remote. I think that there's some great, there's a great way to do that. But I think also really just developing Wyoming and being as cutting edge as possible, knowing that technology is extremely important to personal life, to business, to health, to all of those things. I think it's an investment that's very worthwhile, and we'll see the benefits over a long period of time.
Okay, thank you. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this would be just something of a comment. I hope, Mr. Burrell, as this continues on, you keep an eye out. I'm here in the center of the state, Casper, which has a lot of medical providers. We have a lot of telehealth, and unfortunately, all of the telehealth providers are from out of state. So all of those dollars are flowing out of state, never to come back. And we risk that problem in these other fringe areas of the state. Unfortunately, the telehealth is coming out of Salt Lake, Fort Collins, Billings, Rapid City. It's not coming out of Wyoming, and those dollars are leaving, never to come back. So thank you.
Any comments on that, Mr. Durrell? Or
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and thank you, Representative McGuire. I really appreciate that, and it's you know, our world and our borders are sort of like not necessarily under attack. I don't want to think about it that way, but it is something that we're going to have to contend with. I also hope that the healthcare providers in the state of Wyoming, or perhaps new healthcare providers that continue to grow here, will see that as an opportunity and be able to take advantage of that. And I know it's easier said than done, for sure, but I'm hoping that it generates more of an opportunity, knowing that what you're saying is right now it is very true. So thank you for your comments, though.
okay, go ahead, Josh.
All right. So now let's take a quick look at this is overall, as of October 20th, the CARES Act funding that we received as a state that had been utilized. The brown areas are those that the Wyoming Business Council has administered and has been part of. And so, you know, this is on one hand, I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit of a chest beating exercise, and to show you how hard we've been working over the last few months and that. But I also think it's you know, it's an opportunity to really show what our team and not just our team of people, but also the coordination amongst agencies and the councils that we work with, what we're able to accomplish in a short amount of time. And so again, I think if you take a look at that, boy, I think it's, you know, what is that, about 47% of the CARES Act funding that had been utilized up to October 20th was through the Business Council. So we're pretty happy about that. And, you know, I also want to say that's in, you know, no small part to definitely members of this committee, as well as others throughout the state who have helped us put together these programs and make sure that they went as smoothly as possible in that short amount of time.
I think this committee, more than anyone, is very pleased that you were able to do that. We are the success of what we worked on this spring hinged upon you being able to deliver. So I for one am very pleased.
Thanks. You know, and I will also say this is a picture of one of our meetings as we were putting things together. You met Marcio earlier on, and you'll hear from folks like Josh Keefe and Sarah Fitzgerald on in future slides and in discussions today. But one thing I want to talk about is the way that we worked. So all of the folks on this slide are in different functions throughout the Business Council. And we approach this project in a very, what's called agile way. So there's an agile way of doing project management. And that's where you really have small teams that can make decisions, that can do things and work on their particular problems. And they tend to be cross-functional. We tend to pull people from different areas in order to get a really good cross-section, as well as get, you know, really diversity of thought to come together and solve problems. So we had a number of these, I think 5 or 6 small groups that were working on these business relief programs together. And really this happens every day. We get together in these small teams every single day to cover what needs to be done, what has been done, and what the roadblocks are, so that we can then begin to move things around. And so again, I think, you know, just showcasing a few of the folks and on this is key, and it's important to know the work that is being done. I will say both Marcio and Bert are you know, really critical to this process, and they're brand new. Marcio started about a year ago, and Bert started in at the beginning of March. He actually started right at the beginning of the whole global pandemic. So we've had some people really plug in and do some great work, and it's been a pleasure for sure. Now, looking ahead, I want to, if we can, if anybody has any questions on the business relief programs or anything that maybe came up and you didn't get a chance to ask, Mr. Co-Chair, I'd be happy to take questions on that part before we move into really what's next.
Okay, Senator Rothfuss has a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durrell, one of the things that we talked a little bit about earlier today were some of the challenges that we didn't necessarily foresee, and one that arose was childcare as being a real challenge for getting people back into the labor market under COVID circumstances, and that we know that there was disproportionate challenges there from a gender equity standpoint. So as we get to looking ahead, there might not be a clear answer right now, but it seems that that's something we probably should have addressed, but didn't. And I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that, and maybe what we could do moving forward over the next few months to try to address that, which I think we missed a little bit, but I think we did a hell of a good job with what we got deployed. So, what are your thoughts on that? And again, it may blend into the rest of the conversation, but it's something that I think is important for us to take a look at.
Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Rothfuss. And you bring up a good point that is always a challenge, but it was definitely exacerbated during the pandemic, right? Because childcare, if you're thinking of a workforce and you're thinking of employers in your community and how do we make the right combination, childcare is an incredibly important component of that, to make your community really available, to have a workforce that's available. And so I think the pandemic did really, was able to shine a light on that. And you're right in that we haven't focused much energy onto solving that problem. In fact, I might even go so far as saying that I don't know how big of a problem it is. And I don't know if that is getting better or if it is getting worse right now. But I do know that it is something that we have to look at when we think about workforce that's available in communities and how to make that easy so that we do have a great workforce in our communities.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and Director, I think it is something for us to continue the conversation on, because some minor improvements based on anecdotal evidence, but I think we're still in a circumstance where that is a dominant factor in who is and who isn't able to get back to the workforce, and it's affecting families. And there's so much juggling going on between school, childcare, and work, that it remains disruptive in a way that, again, I think continues to exacerbate the gender wage gap and some of the other issues that this committee's been working on. So thank you for those comments, and yeah, we'll just keep working.
My pleasure, and I think we will definitely look forward to that and trying to figure out good solutions, because again, that it all works together. And I know families that I talk to all face that real good big challenge of juggling all of it. I think we all at the Business Council and across the state are seeing it happen and seeing the challenges there. So yeah, thank you, and thanks for bringing that up again. Thank you.
I want to touch on that just a little bit more. And here we are, November 6th, and it's a little tough, but we don't know what's going to get extended and what the extent of this pandemic, how much longer it's going to continue. And I think it would be a good discussion for your office to have with the governor's office here in the very short term. And, I give an example because I've went through this with employees. And so those employees that are administrative in nature, we can make accommodations for them to go home and take care of their smaller children or their smaller or younger school age children. But those out in the factory, when you're at a station, so I don't have an accommodation for them. Or the gals that might be working in the warehouse. It's the same type of thing. And so I would ask, and I think this whole committee's nodding their head as I talk, that maybe if you would have that discussion with the governor's office, even though we are the first week of November, but as this goes along, that we look at some issues, you know, because it's real. And could be a problem.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely dig into that, have some discussions with the governor's office as well as other agencies that are very close to this. I can think of a few that it would make some sense to talk about what their efforts might be and how we would work together on those. So yes, sir.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Durrell. I appreciate that. I think that's all we can do right now is encourage, and then we can all lean on whoever we can lean on. So, okay. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to throw out there, we don't know what's going to happen in January when all these moratoriums end at the federal level for foreclosures, for rent evictions, all of these. We're going to have some landlords. We're going to have a lot of people who are going to be in a lot of hurt because if your tenants aren't paying their rent, they're not going to have that back pay to pay come January 1st. And then they have all these problems with their, mortgages due and such. So we're going to have a real struggle. And in fact, my personal office, the renters that I have, we didn't have a problem right away. We're having a lot of problems right now. There's a lot of people that are now starting to get sick that weren't sick before. They're losing, pay and things. So we're just seeing, unfortunately, the eye of the storm. So that's something else I want us to be aware of with these funds and things is all those moratoriums are coming to an end. And we're on the crest of a crisis when it comes to housing too. So I don't know if you have any suggestions or ideas, but that's a big one for me. All those moratoriums are coming to an end.
Yeah, I don't think our work is done. So.
Yeah. So thank you, Representative Duncan. There are many things I think out there, and one of the things that we are working on is listening. Right, we're doing a lot of listening. Our strategic partnerships director has been out there talking with businesses, talking with communities, trying to understand what challenges we're up against. Because even if the global pandemic decides that it's done and we want to start back to the kind of the normal things, we know that there are many challenges ahead of us, and so part of it for us is listening to what those challenges are. And so knowing that landlords and those situations are going to get worse, that helps inform who we talk with, what kinds of solutions we can come up with. We talk a lot about the levers that we can pull are really helping create policy, helping with funding, and providing leadership and education if we can. And so knowing that that's a challenge is something that helps us a lot in developing the policy, the ways to fund, and also, of course, the education on what people can do. So thank you.
Okay, we'll keep moving.
All right. So as we look ahead, we know that the extractive industries have been hit really, really hard, and that they will continue to do so. We know that we were at about 4% down compared to 2014. And now we know that we're down over double that. And so we know that there's a big challenge ahead of us. And so in addition to what we're trying to accomplish with the business relief programs and try to keep people, building some resilience and staying afloat, buying a little time, what we want to be able to do is really double down on our strategic plan. And having this strategic plan that was really developed over the course of a period of time before last summer. Now, I guess, summer of 2019. Having this has been very, very helpful during the crisis, because we've had something to point to and say, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is where it helps. And so knowing that we want to develop the core industries that we have and not just protect them, but help them grow or pivot, and then utilize the value chain. I've had some discussions with folks about how do we take more of that value chain, and how do we really, not just maybe pull something out of the ground, but how do we turn it into something that's a little bit more useful and extract some more value and grow some businesses in the state. New economic sectors, that one covers one, but it's a pivot off of core industries, and looking into the things like technology, making sure that we're developing a good entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I know that sounds pretty buzzwordy, but it's true. And in discussions with people who have done the entrepreneurial thing and done really well, they all tell you it's a grind. I will also say that our partnerships across the state, as well as with the University of Wyoming, I believe we're developing those with not only the School of Energy Resources, the Wyoming Energy Authority, but I think from what I'm most excited about is from the top, from President Seidel, putting such a focus on economic development. We are in a spot that I think is really the best we could be at this time, right? Obviously, things aren't fantastic. I'll give you a quick anecdote and then I'll move on. And many of you are involved in the Economic Development Council that President Seidel put together. And at the end of the second meeting, we were all sort of encapsulating the talks of the day. And one person, her name is Ashley, she said, "Hey, it sounds like to me that what we're really saying is that we really want to take the core industries that we have and make them better and build on those. But we also need to be, bringing in new businesses and thinking about new ways to grow, and do that by being one Wyoming." And, we a few of us in the room, kind of, in the virtual room, looked at each other with a smirk, because we knew that was the strategy that we had. And I think what's important there is that we're all starting to sing from the same hymn book. And I think that's going to be important. Now, again, we have a lot of work to do, but we have what I would consider a strong foundation. I'm gonna, if I could, Mr. Co-Chair, turn things over to Sarah Fitzgerald, if I could, and have her talk a little bit about some of the new things that are coming down the pike and how we're looking at things.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Fitzgerald. Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Co-Chair. Yeah, so we do have a very strong foundation, and that strong foundation was there and really helped us have a guiding light and a purpose through COVID-19 and through all of the challenges that our team has risen to meet. But COVID-19 changed a lot. It changed the economic landscape significantly. It presented new opportunities for Wyomingites and for Wyoming, and it also presented new challenges. Our extractive industries, the downturn that had started there has accelerated. We are seeing also, COVID-19 has hurt our core industries of tourism and hospitality very deeply. And so a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities as well. And so when COVID-19 hit, we really, with our board and with our staff, we said, okay, we need to think about how does our strategy change? Does it change? And so what we did was two things. We really knew that we needed to focus on what matters most. The Wyoming Business Council's purpose is creating new opportunities. And so we knew that we needed to focus on that. And then we knew that we also needed to reshape potentially how we get there, considering that we live in a different landscape now. Josh, if you want to go to the next slide.
You bet.
When I say creating new opportunities for Wyomingites, this is all that means. The purpose of the Wyoming Business Council is to create good jobs for Wyomingites. And those statistics that Josh shared, we even before COVID-19, our economy was suffering, and not just our economy, but jobs. People in Wyoming have been suffering from a lack of available jobs for a long time now. We were down 4% since 2014 in March before COVID-19 has hit, and then obviously that's doubled since COVID-19 has hit. So this is the purpose of the Wyoming Business Council, and because this is our purpose, we know that that we needed to double down on our strategy. What we also have done this year is really dialed in on what that purpose means and how to measure that purpose in a really simple and meaningful way. So this is what we try to maximize. We try to maximize the number of new opportunities, new jobs, 1099 work, and remote work that we enable at the Business Council, times the compensation of those new opportunities that we enable. So that includes wages, contracts, benefits, and other compensation. This is just the way that we measure all of our projects and our programs to understand, are we meeting that goal of creating good jobs for Wyomingites? This is how we've done so far lately. So we have created almost around 660 jobs annually over the past 5 years. And those are direct jobs. Almost 4,000 indirect jobs over the past same years per year. So that's an average, that's an annual average over the past 5 years. I mean, you can see how those kind of pencil out compared to the dollars that we put into each of our direct job creating programs, which are the Business Ready Communities program, which I think a lot of you are very familiar with. The Challenge Loan programs, which Josh Keefe can talk more to. He's on the call as well. Our Main Street program, which is very active in communities across the state, helping do business development kind of for the purpose of community development in a lot of cities throughout the state, as well as our Startup Wyoming programs, the SBIR Match program and Kickstart Wyoming programs. And I'll go into a little bit more detail there. I know that we submitted our annual report for these two programs recently, and I know that some of you had questions on those. So I'll take an opportunity to kind of give a brief overview for those of you who haven't really thought about these recently, and then be able to answer some questions on the data that we provided earlier a couple weeks ago. So the Startup Wyoming programs were created a few years ago in 2018 by the legislature, and they include two kind of main programs that we administer, the Kickstart Wyoming program and the SBIR Match program. Kickstart Wyoming provides competitive grants to Wyoming high growth potential startups. And so what that high growth potential means, it means that those companies are scalable, that they've got a globally differentiated product or service. And these companies, a lot of them tend to be in technology, but not always. And so they really run the range of different industries. But really the key there is that high growth potential. That means more jobs. That means more jobs per dollar that we put in. The maximum award amount there is $50,000. All of the funding decisions are based on the potential public benefit to Wyoming. Combined with and kind of intrinsic to that is the ability of the applicant to actually commercialize the company, and then also the amount of funding requested. We tested this program starting in October 2018 through May 2019, so a 6-month beta test. We planned to relaunch this program in 2020, but that has unfortunately been delayed due to COVID-19. The SBIR matching program matches funds for...
Let me interrupt, because I do know that one of our representatives had a question on it, and I just think with your beta test is how many awards were given, and what has been sort of the success or failure. I mean, they are startup companies. What are you seeing in terms of this program being effective?
Yeah, sure. Josh, if you want to go ahead on to the next slide, get the numbers there. So through the Kickstart Wyoming program in the beta test, 19 companies were funded, and that was for a total of $1.86 million. all but a couple of those are still in business. Now, a couple have failed, and that's about 10%. And that's kind of what we expect. You know, when you talk to venture capital investors, angel investors, you know, there's a range of success rates, but about 10% fail, sometimes about 10% succeed. So we know that that a lot of the companies that are in these early stages of their development are not going to succeed. And so we really try to look at this program and really both the SBIR program and the Kickstart Wyoming program and all of what we do in the world of startup ecosystem as a portfolio. Recognizing that just because a company doesn't make it past the first year doesn't mean that the people who founded that company aren't going to go on to start a new company, aren't going to be great mentors and learn from those failures. And so we do expect that. And then I've kind of combined the data that we sent out here, but combined with SBIR, with the 15 companies that were funded through the SBIR matching program since October 2018, which is still up and running today. Those companies have earned more than $10 million in follow-on funding so far. And so that's more than 5 times the amount of funding that we've put into there. They've also created 53 direct jobs and 276 indirect jobs. And those average wages are critical here because we're investing in those high growth potential companies with this program. They tend to be on the higher wage side. And so $30 an hour is very, very high compared to the median wage in Wyoming and in most of our counties across Wyoming. And so not only are we creating jobs at a pretty small price tag compared to other economic development programs, but they're good jobs. And so very proud of that. And that all comes down to an overall economic impact of $19 million. And that's over just that 6-month beta test for Kickstart. And then since October 2018, so a couple of years for SBIR match.
Okay, I'm going to go to Senator Rothfuss and then Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm happy to see these results. This is a good, valuable presentation for us since we worked all of these programs over the last few years. But a quick question just on the numbers there. And then I've got a follow-up question. 1.86 million for the Kickstart. Maximum is $50,000 per grant for the Kickstart. That should be 950,000-ish as the maximum. So I'm a little bit curious about how we get to 1.86 million with those numbers.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, Mr. Co-Chair. That's a typo. That should be 830. Those are reversed. So reversed. Kickstart $836,000, and SBIR is $1.86 million. I'm sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman, and that then explains the next question, which is I was surprised that the other one was lower since it's 100,000 per pop, and typically that's what you end up getting out of an SBIR. So that explains both. Yep. And Mr. Chairman, then the next question, more substantive. From the beta test on Kickstart, some of the feedback that I got was that folks that were interested originally in Kickstart ended up opting out of Kickstart because they felt that the requirements still ended up being relatively onerous relative to the amount of money they received. I think we heard that in this committee. I believe the chairman heard the same concerns. And so we might be hearing comment later on that. That might be some of the feedback you're already providing. If not, I'd appreciate kind of hearing your thoughts on it now. If you're going to bring it up later, I'm perfectly willing to wait. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, go ahead, Ms. Fitzgerald.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Co-Chair, and thanks, Senator Rothfuss. Yeah, so we performed that beta test just for that purpose, to understand, to try it and to hear feedback from the companies who were trying to serve with that. And so that's super valuable information. The other feedback that we've gotten is that two kind of main things. One, we're kind of missing an opportunity for exposure with this program. Startups not only need access to capital, but they also need exposure to other investors and to each other and to the broader startup ecosystem, really. Startups also need education, and startups also need networking. And so what this program did was it started to kind of fill that gap that we see with access to capital. And it fills a very narrow kind of portion of the capital spectrum for these companies. But, you know, we have an opportunity because we have this, this program, we have an opportunity to leverage it to get these companies more exposure to other investors and to each other. And our companies also asked for access to a mentor network specifically, and for more education and really kind of the services that need to wrap around these investments to make them as successful as possible. That not only helps the companies that we're serving, but also helps, you know, the state realize the highest return on our investment as well. And so all of that makes sense. So thanks so much for your comment, Senator Rothfuss, and hopefully we will be able to relaunch this program in 2021, barring the conversation we were having earlier about what the heck's COVID going to do, but and that's really good information to have as we do that. So thank you.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this is a good place to ask my questions. And so, Sarah, with the 53 direct jobs and 276 indirect jobs, how did you come up with the 276 number?
Yeah, great question, Mr. Co-Chair. So that's based on economic multipliers. So the Economic Performance Institute publishes, I believe it's Economic Performance Institute, it's EPI, publishes industry multipliers for jobs basically every year, and that's based on how many jobs a direct job will create given the industry that it's created in. So how that works, you know, in practice, if we create one good job at a Wyoming startup, we can use Frontline Fire Protection. They're one of the companies that we've invested in. If we create one good job paying $30 an hour there, that means that person is going to go out into their town and spend money on all of the things that they need, on groceries, on restaurants, on houses, on everything that they need. And what that direct job does is create other direct jobs at the groceries, at restaurants, in construction, and those are all secondary jobs. So that 276 is the result of creating those first 50 or so direct jobs.
Okay.
So,
Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. And with your indulgence, I have several questions.
Yep,
so back to the previous slide, the 19 million in economic impact, how was that calculated?
Yeah, so that's calculated with an economic model. And so that not only takes into account the indirect jobs created, but the economic impact of all of the jobs created. The way that we ran this economic model, the only inputs that we use are the jobs created. So we don't take into account, any of the physical infrastructure like buildings or anything like that on these types of projects, because the value really is in the jobs. And so that's the total economic impact output, GDP, basically, that this program adds to the economy.
Is that an annual number?
That's total. So that includes the impact from the 6-month beta test, and then little bit over 2 years for the SBIR match program.
Okay, so it's not a 10-year number or discounted or anything. It would be more of an annual GDP type of calculation. Sorry, Representative Burkhardt, I'm just curious about that.
No, that's fine, Mr. Chairman. And I think this is just as good a place as any is to continue some of the thoughts I had. And I would ask the director to chime in here too. So I have in front of me the reports you issued under the statutory requirements, and you meet the statutory requirements, but I would like more information, like where these companies are and what they actually do, what their product is. You know, and I just picked one, SSI LLC, says knowledge and creative economies. They have no commercialization to date. I'd really like to know what our money is going for, what they have done, and that where they're at and what they actually do.
Yeah.
And not a statutory requirement, but please don't misunderstand. And I know this is all a lot of work for you, but I think a little more information for the committee would be helpful.
Well, and maybe what we could do in the interest of time, because I don't want to go through 15 businesses, is maybe we could ask for that synopsis and have that provided to the committee in the next couple of weeks, because I too would be interested to know what we're looking at. It would help us overall. Is that okay with you, Representative Burkhardt, if we did it that way?
Mr. Chairman, that's fine. And I was going to suggest that you just decided to move faster than I was.
Okay. All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that takes care of my questions, and we can handle this one offline. I know the council makes decisions based on the best information they have, but some of the things on here, update on commercialization and some of the comments, and I imagine they got these from the companies, caused me a little bit of concern of what we're doing with our money. So we can take that offline. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think we could get a more comprehensive report and could look through that if that would be workable with the business council. Okay. All right. I think we all know the SBIR program pretty well, so maybe we can continue to keep moving forward.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Co-Chair, and I'm prepared to talk about a few in detail, but since we're going to provide that synopsis for all of you, maybe we just kind of scoot past this slide and move on to the opportunity that Wyoming has been provided thanks to COVID-19, and I'll give this one back over to Josh to talk about this.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And I guess before we move on too far, I do, Mr. Co-Chair, if I could, just to circle back with Senator Rothfuss as well, if we could, I would like to spend some time. You said something about a process being onerous. We may not know all of the reasons it's onerous. We might know some of them. So we will circle back with you as well to learn a little bit more about Kickstart and how we can make that better. So thank you for your comments.
Yeah, do not forget our Constitution when you're having that discussion, please.
Indeed. I think there's a portion of it, I believe it's 16.6. It seems fairly important there. So thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Moving forward, there is, and I think we've all seen it in the news. We've also seen it in our own, in our day-to-day, that there is a dramatic opportunity in front of us. We will be talking very shortly about a couple programs that we have working, as well as some successes that we're seeing already because of what we're seeing as an exodus from some of these areas that are just not as nice to live as Wyoming. Let's be frank about it. Wyoming is not just for business climate, but also just in general. It's a very safe, very open place, and we, it's something that we're seeing a good opportunity there, and we're set up to take advantage of it. A couple different ways that we're doing that. We worked closely with Workforce Services, the folks at the Office of Tourism, to put together a program called Why Relocate. And since we did a campaign, and you can see that we took in 1,931 people that were, or entities that were interested since that October 1st timeframe. Those are folks who are looking to relocate to Wyoming, who wanted information about how to do that. Businesses that are looking to move. A lot going on, and I think we're set up to take advantage of it. What's exciting about this is that we, working across state agencies, we all sort of know where we are from a budget standpoint, and that it's not a big mystery that things are really, really squeaky tight. However, when we got together with these other agencies, we were able to really kind of serve the needs of all three of us with that, and really kind of just chip in a third of what it would take to do it. And so the cooperation was great, but what it led to is it's pretty eye-opening on how much response we had to that. So that's something that we're focused on. And again, we touched on it with broadband. We definitely feel like being able to move knowledge workers to the state that will have a positive impact economically to the state, as well as to our communities, is a really big opportunity that's in front of us. Having that connectivity, having good facilities for people to work in is important. And then, of course, hopefully being able to have them start businesses or bring more of their folks along. And again, we're looking for those opportunities. In addition to that, I do want to talk briefly about a company that just is moving to Wyoming from Oregon. And, business, political, workforce, climate really brought them to Wyoming. And Avalon International is an aluminum manufacturing company. They make door frames, door window frames, fixtures that are used in industrial buildings, as well as, I believe, even in consumer buildings. And they found Wyoming to be, not just very business friendly, matched and aligned with their with the political views, and had a workforce that they felt like would be very, very beneficial to them. They are coming to the Evanston area in the next, I think they're going to be here in about a year or so. They were just approved by SLIB yesterday. But they are looking to really expand, and their business plan shows that they have grown very steadily, and they're looking to grow even more. A great offset to some of the challenges that area is facing right now. And if you look at what they're trying to bring, along with another manufacturer that chose Evanston from Oregon in July, a company called ISA that makes a number of rubber glove and foot protection products. They are really, beginning to see the benefits of Wyoming. And I think these are a couple really good examples of that.
Good.
Well, we stand for questions. We definitely appreciate everyone's time today and apologize for running over a bit.
Well, you ran over because of our questions, which means it was a good presentation. And so we appreciate it. Appreciate the work you're doing. And never think for a minute that we are not going to provide a great deal of scrutiny to help you be better. So that's your job.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. And that's exactly how we see it. We definitely appreciate the comments and the help outside of the committee meetings that by this team. We get a lot from you, and we sure appreciate it. And we want to be better. So thank you.
Yeah, this is a good committee for you to report to. A lot of good business minds on this committee. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and move on then, and to the last item.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, we have public comment for this topic.
Oh, I am sorry. And I should have known that. Lisa Johnson had signed up. I apologize. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Sorry, Lisa. Okay, Lisa, you're on mute. All right. Ms. Johnson, please, I apologize. I had it right here. Go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm Lisa Johnson. I'm joining you today on behalf of the Wyoming Economic Development Association. We represent 200 economic developers across the state of Wyoming that are working hard to support new and expanding businesses and to develop a skilled workforce. And so the reason I wanted to just make this quick introduction this afternoon following the presentation from the Wyoming Business Council is because traditionally the Wyoming Economic Development Association has held the Wyoming Business Council as a very valued partner, and the programs that they offer to us are very valuable for our members. We've also always supported the direct funding to cities and municipalities and counties rather. And most importantly, just creating a sound business climate. I know you've heard other discussions and worked on some bills throughout the past couple days that would do just that, would be offering some predictability for businesses that are looking to grow in Wyoming. And it's just important to our members that we give our input to help shape public policy that is useful and helps Wyoming communities be competitive so that we can have some short-term successes for businesses that are going to lead to a long-term positive and enduring impact. So just wanted to reach out to you as I've just begun working for the Wyoming Economic Development Association as their public policy person, following up on the good work that was done by Chris Brown. And so as our members are listening to the work of your committee, we will be reaching out to you individually in our own communities. And if there's anything that you need some input on from the economic development community, we stand ready to work close with you. So thank you for this time.
All right, well, thank you. We appreciate the comments. We understand the importance of WIDA, and unfortunately, because we're doing a virtual meeting, typically at this meeting, we probably would have had a dinner and heard a more in-depth presentation, which I think we've always limited to like 45 seconds, but anyway, so no, we appreciate your comments. Any questions for Ms. Johnson? Okay. Thank you again. We appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate you following along and carrying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Okay, so now we'll move on to the last item on our agenda. If we can get the Aeronautics Division, and I think General Reiner is scheduled. Okay, so while they are coming in, Senator Coe, there's no coincidence that the last item on our agenda happens to be aeronautics, my good friend. And this is your last minerals meeting. And so I just want to take the opportunity, one, to thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being a mentor to me. And I'm going to dearly miss you on this committee going forward. And I know aeronautics has always been something near and dear to your heart. And you've served the state of Wyoming in this area. And I'd just like to give you a couple of moments to comment to the committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll notice, my last meeting on minerals, I'm gonna miss everybody a lot, and you will remember that I passed an amendment. So I want the committee to remember that one of the last things I did was passing an amendment. So that's a positive note. But aeronautics and air service is, in fact, my passion. I still head up Cody Yellowstone Air here in Cody, and we've had great success with the program going back to 2004. We passed the original Air Service Enhancement Bill in, I believe, the 2003 session. That's been with us ever since. And actually, the state of Wyoming has had remarkable success with this program. Now we're into the capacity purchase agreement stuff with critical airports, growth airports, all good things passed by the legislature. And I want to recognize Senator Michael von Flatern, who also is not coming back for his work on the CPC program. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your thoughts. And I want the whole committee to know I'm going to miss everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I realize it doesn't have the same effect, but I mean, that's the worst thing about not meeting in person is this. So Senator Rothfuss and then Chairman Anderson, I'll let you have the first word on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'll have another opportunity to spend some time on committee with Senator Coe, as we've still got some education work ahead of us. But I've spent my entire legislative career on the Minerals Committee. Every year I've been here. Every year of that time, Senator Hank Coe has been here. And, he's one of my best friends, one of my greatest mentors since I've been in the legislature. I appreciate all that he's taught me. I appreciate all the time we've spent together, all the time we've laughed, and all of the great policy that we worked together on over the years on this committee and in education. And that's why I voted for his amendment today.
It really wasn't that good of an amendment.
It wasn't that great. No, really. I mean, but it was fine. And, it's his last meeting. So I was going to vote for it. And I do wish we had a better opportunity to send off Hank and spend time with him, take him out to dinner. And I hope we'll have that opportunity within over the next year, that we'll get on up to Cody, maybe as a committee, or get in that area and do a better job of saying goodbye to our good friend, Senator Hank Coe. But, I'll always value everything that he's taught me and all the time we've spent together.
Chairman Anderson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Greer. Hank Coe is a legend in Wyoming. The things that he's done in the state legislature and being president of the Senate, everywhere that he's been put, he's excelled. He's been that education person for years in Wyoming and brought them along and kept that thing moving. No matter where anybody asked him to serve, he was well liked and did a commendable job that everybody in the state could figure that out. We're really sorry to lose him off this committee because of his strength and his wisdom and his depth of knowledge of all of these subjects. So Hank, we don't look forward to trying to replace you, but you enjoy yourself and have a good time in Arizona. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all. Chairman Anderson read that little speech just the way I wrote it for him. And, I'm moved by it all. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks, Hank. We appreciate it. Okay, General Reiner, that's hard to follow, but it was the appropriate time to honor our good friend. So, sir, if you could present us with your report, or who on your team is going to do so, we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'll tell you, we will all miss the good senator. Hey, in terms of discussion today, I know we're going to jump in aeronautics here pretty quick, but I thought we should take an opportunity just to maybe update a little bit on the status of transportation and its effect on the economy in the state. And so we wanted to spend just a couple slides on sort of surface transportation and how we're doing there, and then we'll flip into aeronautics, and I'll kick the floor over to Mr. Burke and Administrator Olson. But I'll tell you, on this slide that you see up in front of you, when I came to this position about a year and a half ago, one of the first things I asked was, hey, what's our purpose? And immediately people started going to a mission statement. I said, let's talk purpose. And so we spent some time, talking about, hey, what's WYDOT's purpose? And you can see it that we generated was, support Wyoming's economy while safely connecting communities and improving the quality of life. And that has served us well over the last year and a half as we've focused in on really budget priorities, and as we focused in on what do we spend our money on in these days of constrained resources. And so, you know, you see the little list below there about what WYDOT is responsible for. And it's certainly more than roads, certainly more than airports, you know, with the patrol and driver services and the WYOMING system that everybody's aware of. And so it's broad, and each area impacts an economic a portion of the state. And so if you flip to the next slide, please, then it has, as we talk among our senior staff in WYDOT about, hey, what is our focus? We spend a considerable amount of time talking about how do we support ag and tourism and mineral extraction, and you can see the list there, because it is our economy rides on our roads, and our economy comes in at our airports. And we have, you know, besides those two, I've been significantly involved this interim in this broadband development and some of the discussion that we had with the Business Council in terms of leveraging some of the WyoLink tower assets that are around the state, and using those to, again, support the economy of our state. I would report to you that we are working very closely with the interagency, specifically with the group of agencies listed on the right. In fact, we, you know, formally meet with them, you know, at least once a month or more, just trying to figure out, hey, how do, in our case, it's, you know, how we're sort of the, you know, with the tourism, we're the tourism distribution system, and we got to have it right. And so those are really the areas of focus where I, you know, sort of push the staff and say, hey, what can we do in each one of these areas to support the state as we go about this business of economic development? Some specific things, you know, we're certainly focusing on is, you know, the potential to have, you know, bike paths, et cetera, and you can see the list there. Let me just flip to the next slide then, because this is probably just a quick report to you on, not on aeronautics, we'll get to aeronautics next, but this is a report to you on our ground transportation infrastructure. And the summary is, we probably aren't looking as good as we'd like to. And as the distribution system that supports our economy, we're seeing signs of stress. And I'll just maybe start on the right and work my way to the left. But, you know, the engineering term for a hole in a bridge is a skylight. You know, because if you're down below and you look up, you know, there's a hole in the bridge. It looks like a skylight. Well, those are happening. And if you hit one of those on a motorcycle, it's a really bad day. But certainly it slows down commerce when we have those. And so, you know, that one's fixed, you know, as an emergency repair, and it's done. Same thing with the potholes off in the middle on I-80. Again, that was really from last year, but we had miles and miles and miles of I-80 where we had to slow the speed limit down, and where people were hitting potholes, and you get the complaint of, hey, you broke my tire, and I bent my rim, and I had my you know, vehicle realigned because of the condition of the road. And again, emergency repair, but not to the depth that we would have wished. The picture on the left is the one that really struck me about the economic impact of our infrastructure. And I just share the story with you. This one is from this year, and it's from Teton County, and it's the bridge on 22 heading west. So you leave Jackson, go over the bridge, and then you go up Teton Pass. And we lost that bridge in terms of its ability to carry weight. We left it open, but it was load rated, which meant that if you were a construction company trying to get gravel from one side to the other, you had to take half a load, and it took you twice as long. In the fall, when we were trying to ship cattle, it was not uncommon to get a call from, you know, from a rancher, say, man, what's the deal? I can't ship like I want to. And in each case, we could not put the weight on the bridge because you risk losing the entire bridge. And so if you're shipping cattle, you had to take, basically 2 trucks where you used to take 1. And it just struck me as that it was a significantly negative impact on our economy. What's interesting about us as you think about roads, and I think about them in lines of communication and how we go back and forth, is in that particular case, there's really no detour because the detour for cars could be up over Teton Pass and through Idaho, and 2 hours later, you can be back where you were. If you're a heavy truck, there's no detour because you can't go over Teton Pass. And so I just share that with you in terms of I'm concerned about the ground infrastructure of our roads and the potential impact and actually the demonstrated impact on our economy. Now, the good thing on that bridge, hey, we did an emergency repair. It's about $500,000, and that bridge actually will be replaced in 2023. It's well over 50 years old, as are many of our bridges, and you can see the stats that are on there.
We have a question, General. Sorry to interrupt, but
you bet.
Has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Reiner, I spent a lot of time on Interstate 80. The picture on the right, where was that at?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Burkhart, to the best of my knowledge, that was in District 1, and I believe it was, I want to say west of Laramie, but Representative, I'd have to get you the exact location.
Just curious. Thank you.
Sure, you bet.
Okay. All right. Well, General Reiner, we understand.
Yeah. So moving on. What you'll see is just the next slide, please. And this is really the last slide I'd like to share with you, because I know you're all tracking, hey, we've closed some rest areas and we've put a hold on some new mobility and capacity improvement type jobs. And I just want to share with you why. And the why is because we are not maintaining, our infrastructure the way we should be, just because we don't have enough money. And the deterioration curve is fast. And you can see, the story is always, hey, spend $1 now or spend a lot more, later down the road. And it's the old commercial of, the oil filter. And so we are taking assets and pushing them as much as we can to preserve the assets that we currently do have. And as you sort of are aware of, what's going on in WYDOT and the decisions we're making, it's really based on trying to maintain what we have. As really, in my mind, it's sort of a fiscally conservative approach to maintain what we have. And I do think it's all directly related to this business of supporting the economy of our state. Joint Transportation is working on some alternate revenue ideas, and they'll probably likely bubble up in the session. But I just did want to share with this committee that's focused on the economy, really some of the effects on the economy of our grand transportation system. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's a quick summary of that. And unless there's questions on ground, I'll happily push this to our Wyoming Air Service update.
Committee? No, General, I think we appreciate the update. And I'm sure that almost every member on this committee attends their local STIP meetings each year. And so we are familiar with the graph and the information that your people are getting out to the local governments, and we appreciate that effort and being apprised of it. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So then, Mr. Olson, are you going to take the lead, or is Mr. Burke going to on the aeronautics report?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, maybe I'll have a few comments before Mr. Burke takes over. And thank you and good afternoon, committee members. As Dr. Reiner indicated, I'm Brian Olson, the Aeronautics Administrator for WYDOT. and we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. Before I proceed, I would like to just take a moment and, on behalf of the Aeronautics Division and the Aeronautics Commission, I'd like to extend a very sincere thank you to Senator Coe for his leadership and all he's done to strengthen aviation in Wyoming. It's a great benefit to us today, and it will be to future generations, and we're very grateful for that. With that, Mr. Chairman, the challenges that we face this year in the aviation industry are really unprecedented. A year ago today, I would never have guessed that we would have experienced what we've experienced in the industry. With that said, I will say that even though the challenges have been significant, we've been very proactive to work to mitigate those things, especially on the air service side and commercial air service. And we've had some very good tools at our disposal, the Air Service Enhancement Program, and in particular, the Capacity Purchase Agreement. And those are at our disposal due to those wise legislators that put those programs in place over the past number of years. So we're thankful for those and wanted to extend that. And then we're just working through the challenges as they come. Things were looking better, and with the current COVID situation, there's still lots of challenges. So we're working through them, and we intend to come out on the other side in a very good position. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Sean Burke with your permission.
Okay, and as we go forward on this, and so I was not one of those wise legislators. I have been very suspect of the capacity purchase agreements, and then I assumed that with the pandemic that's really been really tough on this concept. And again, it's a concept I would hope that I was wrong about. And so I'm very interested, as I think the rest of the committee is, on how that program is going and what it looks like, what's its future success. And so that's what I would like a lot of this presentation and discussion to revolve around.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sean Burke, and I serve as the Air Service Development Program Manager for WYDOT. A couple updates for you on air service in the state. The first, just an update on statewide figures, where we're at, what 2019 looked at since the last time we provided an update. An update on the Air Service Enhancement Program expenditures, an update on the Capacity Purchase Agreement, and where that stands. And then finally, Administrator Olson is going to provide an update on the Economic Impact Study of Aviation. Next slide, please. So looking, since the last time we provided an update, 2019 was a record-setting year for the state of Wyoming. In total passengers, as measured as a passenger getting on and off an aircraft, we served 1,348,000 passengers to the state. We were up 15.5% from the record-setting year of 2018. So things were running pretty hot in 2019, and we were excited what 2020 was going to look like. Next slide, please. And to give you a sense of just how well Wyoming did in the national landscape, as measured by the FAA enplanements, Wyoming was the fastest growing state in 2019 with 14% growth from 2018 compared to the national average of about 4% there.
Mr. Burke, I'm sorry, but I always have to put things in context. Is this are these calendar year numbers, or are these WYDOT fiscal year or federal government fiscal year numbers?
Mr. Chairman, these are calendar year figures.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Next slide, please. And so breaking down the total passengers by airport, you can see Wyoming's largest airport there in Jackson. It kind of led the pack in terms of passenger volume growth, but it was also a record-setting year for not just Jackson Hole, but also Cody and Laramie as well. So most airports were doing relatively well through 2019. Casper was returning to its 2015 levels after Allegiant had left. Gillette had come onto the capacity purchase agreement in late 2019 and was increasing their enplanements. Laramie's a good story of just incremental growth year after year after year. The same story in Riverton, Rock Springs, and Sheridan. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, this is a graph of the market share of total passengers by airport in the state. So to kind of give you a sense of just how much market share Jackson takes. So about 64.5% of all the passengers in the state originate or deplane in Jackson. And next slide, please. And this is a graph of where the other airports kind of land and what the remaining market share is in the state. You have Casper about 14.2%, Cody right around 6%, Gillette 4.4%, and then it gets kind of an amalgamation below Gillette there between the remaining airports in the state. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, this is to kind of give you a sense of how much COVID-19 impacted passenger enplanements in the state. This is just showing the calendar year from January through June, so the first 6 months of the year, year over year, and kind of what happened. So 2019 off to a great start, obviously on that record-setting year, and then 2020 hit and COVID-19 really started to affect passenger enplanements starting in March. So the state lost about 45.5% of their total passengers just within that 6-month period from January through June.
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Burke, how is that similar to national average numbers, or do you know the answer to that?
Mr. Co-Chair, in general, and we'll talk about it in a couple slides here, Wyoming has fared better than the national averages, and that's true of the Western U.S. in general. But I'll touch on that here in a little bit.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So, where passenger trends are nationally, and this is up through August when we provided an update to the Air Select Committee. Nationally, leisure traffic is down 77%, corporate and business traffic is down 89%. So everything's dented pretty heavily in terms of what traffic is out there, but leisure traffic less so than corporate traffic. So leisure markets in general nationally have fared better, such as some of those sunspots in Florida and Phoenix and in the Western US over the summer period. Jackson was a prime case of that. In Wyoming, visiting traffic is responsible for 93% of that total traffic through August. So when you break that down, for every one passenger citizen in Wyoming that gets on an aircraft, there were 15 that were getting off the aircraft to come visit Wyoming in 2020. And compare that to 6-to-1 in 2019. It's a pretty substantial increase in the share of passengers that were visiting the state. Next slide, please. So this is where Wyoming stands nationally for July through September. So calendar year, July through September is third quarter. Wyoming has recovered the most amount of passengers of any state in the country. We've recovered about 49% of our total traffic. Second to us is Montana, and they're about 45% of their total traffic. So again, the rural mountain states are faring a little bit better nationally. Towards the right end of the graph there, you have some of the states out east and Hawaii with some of their more restrictive visitation rules. So good news for the states that, we're doing relatively well.
Just a second, Mr. Burke. Go ahead, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean, looking at this really good growth for Wyoming over the last year or so, is it possible to look at some of the components, the big parts of it in terms of what I'm thinking about is, can we tell in all these employments how many are related to, like business having their employees, fly out of Wyoming, like down to Texas or something for training and come back kind of stuff? How much of this is related? Can we link some of this to our investment in business? Maybe that's an easier way to ask the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Burke.
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Henderson, we do track it to a certain extent. How much is business traffic? How much is more leisure-oriented traffic? I think when we're working on an updated economic impact study, one of the things that came out of one of the previous studies was that businesses surveyed typically relied on air service heavily that were located in the state. And it seems like businesses that are looking at business siting or looking for locations within Wyoming, typically that's one of the questions that they ask is, how's your air service? Do you have air service? So, it's definitely out there, and it's an important tool for business development, certainly.
Okay.
Yep. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, looking at some of the post-COVID-19 impacts. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Go ahead, Chairman Anderson. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that this increase in our air traffic has a big portion as part of what we spend on tourism every year to try to bring tourists into this area. Obviously, they come into Jackson and Cody to go through the park and those kind of things. And I think that shows that the money is being well spent and targeted to the areas that actually would bring in tourists into those areas. So I think it shows also that tourism dollars are being well spent. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at some of those post-COVID-19 impacts, small airports are perhaps some of the more affected out there, in that some airports have lost service completely. There's about somewhere between 8 to 11 airports nationwide that have lost service completely after October 1st. A number of other airports have also lost service to a second or a third hub and just have one carrier in their market. So certainly the market, the air service market is shrinking. Aircraft are being parked. What's happening is more competition as demand returns for those remaining aircraft and resources. So getting into the capacity purchase agreement, yes, the biggest thing about it was cost savings, which I'll talk through in a little bit, but not just cost savings, but also to provide a backstop in the volatile world of commercial air service. So that at the very least, we had the framework in place should the Essential Air Service Program provided by the federal government go away, or a global pandemic hit, we still were able to retain some service and to ultimately secure those limited resources for Wyoming. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, this is a summary of expenditures from the last time we talked a year ago for the Air Service Enhancement Program, just to kind of provide there were some open grants that were taking place. So this is to show where they were after they had closed up. So for example, the Cody Yellowstone Regional Airport received a grant from the Air Service Enhancement Program for $134,000 for service to Chicago O'Hare. That performed very well over the summer of 2019. We ended up only expending $41,250 of that grant. So $93,000 were returned to the program. And that provided an additional 1,500 passengers to the Cody Airport. And Riverton and Sheridan needed an amendment to bring them onto the capacity purchase agreement, which required an additional $935,000. Rock Springs was able to extend their grant another 3 months with no additional financial amendment in order to bridge them to the capacity purchase agreement, which they were brought on starting early October of 2019. Next slide, please. And Mr. Chairman, this is an updated graph of what the fiscal year 2020, or excuse me, chart or table of the fiscal year 2020 expenditures for the Air Service Enhancement Program. So there was 3 grants that took place in fiscal year 2020. The first being Cheyenne, which reinstated service on American Eagle operated by SkyWest. That was discontinued early due to COVID-19 back in April. The second is to bring United Airlines into Cheyenne. And then the third is Jackson Hole Airport grant to JH Air, which required a state grant of $140,000. And this was for peak winter seasonal service for additional lift to Dallas Fort Worth. And we expended the entirety of that grant in part because of COVID-19. Next slide, please.
Do you have a question, Representative Crank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Burke, all the numbers in this slide match the same numbers in the slide before that. I don't know if I'm following what's going on there, or these are projected or what?
If you can go to the previous slide, please. Mr. Chairman or Co-Chair and Representative Crank, we provided in error, I copied over the same table from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20 in the copy that was provided to you earlier. We did provide an updated copy to the LSO office that you should have received. So this is the updated version of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Crank. I had to go to the handout as well for eyesight. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Burke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair. My apologies for that. So this is an updated table on where the expenditures landed for the capacity purchase agreement. We were able to recover dollars in every market with the exception of Rock Springs. This is before CARES Act money is taken into account. And we were able to deliver additional passengers into Gillette, Riverton, and Sheridan, which I'll share here in the next slide, please. So some of the
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what is that? What's that term you're able to recover dollars? What explain that to me?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, we have within the contract with SkyWest Airlines, we anticipate to spend a certain amount of dollars. If passenger traffic is higher than we expect, if fares are in total revenue is higher than we expect, and we don't end up expending as much as we anticipate, then that amount of money is recovered back into the pool for the capacity purchase agreement. Okay. So in the case, should I elaborate, Mr. Chairman?
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that what was represented actually was going to happen. So then with the COVID-19, assume that trend changed, but you were just talking about CARES Act dollars. How does that interplay work?
Mr. Chairman, so what's shown on this table is before the CARES Act money even comes into it. So before we even utilize any of the CARES Act money, for example, Gillette was able to recover $120,000 back into the pool for the capacity purchase agreement. So before we tapped into that, we were still able to recover funds. Things were still performing relatively well. Even amidst COVID-19, in part because we reduced the amount of flying that was taking place.
Okay, all right. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I had about 12 business trips I didn't have to go on this year, but I did go on one, and I actually flew out of Gillette for various reasons, but because it was convenient because of the extra flight, and that flight going was packed and coming back was packed. So. Yeah, thank you.
That's good to hear, Mr. Chairman. Next slide, please.
Senator Rothfuss has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back on that slide, please. So as we're looking at the capacity purchase, I just want to make sure that I kind of understand the flow. The state grant goes out, as I understand it, as sort of the lead funds. The state dollars expended is, as I understand it, a net value because of the state dollars recovered, some of those coming back. Am I accurately describing what those dollars represent? So the state dollars expended is the net from the fund of state appropriated dollars. Is that all accurate?
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Rothfuss, yes, so that state dollars expended is in that taken out of the state grant. And then that state dollars recovered line is how much comes back into the program. The remainder of that state grant originally.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Co-Chair, so some of the highlights of the capacity purchase agreement prior to COVID-19 hitting the airline world. Gillette had its best fourth quarter calendar year on record. They also had their best January and second best February on record. Riverton had its second best February. Sheridan did well with its best February on record, and more than doubled the amount of enplanements that they had received from 2019. And you know, post COVID-19 in Sheridan, Riverton, this is pretty exciting that they were the only airports in the continental U.S. to actually show year-over-year growth in August and September of 2020. So there's certainly some high points even in this post-COVID-19 environment. Okay. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, so the capacity purchase agreement was ultimately about delivering more passengers for a lower cost and saving the state money, saving local partners money. And we were able to realize that through a 60% reduction in per passenger costs in Sheridan and Riverton combined. In both of those markets, we were able to provide 43% more passengers prior to COVID-19 and reduce overall costs by 9%. And in that table below, you show that the total cost per passenger in each one of those communities was more than half.
Okay.
Next one. Perfect. So looking at the aggregate between Sheridan and Riverton and Rock Springs and Gillette over the same period that before they came onto the capacity purchase agreement, we were able to fulfill that goal of delivering more passengers for less cost. We were able to provide 9,000 additional passengers in both of those in all four of those markets, and do it for $75,000 less than we had expended previously. So certainly a good success of the capacity purchase agreement in the first year.
So I can say that it appears that I was wrong, and I was hoping to be wrong on this. So this hope this trend continues. I don't mind being wrong when it's a good thing for the state of Wyoming.
Next slide, please. And Mr. Chairman, going into the CARES Act relief funds, we were able to receive $4.2 million, just under $4.2 million in relief towards a capacity purchase agreement that was authorized by the governor's office for those additional expenditures realized by COVID-19. That includes both the state match and the local match, and that is explicitly to be used in the 10-month period between March 2020 and December 2020. And through September, we've expended about 1.8 million of that. That has been reimbursed or sought from the CARES Act funds.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. And if I can turn it over to Administrator Olson, I'll provide you an update on the economic impact study.
Well, Mr. Burke, that was a much different report than what I was expecting. So that's good. Committee, any further questions? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to go back to the capacity purchase agreement CARES Act funding slide. So one back. That was sort of a brief description. I want to understand how those funds are being used, and I kind of have some assumptions, but is that holding all of our airlines, or not airlines, or our airports, basically our air service, for the entities that are working under the capacity purchase agreement? Is that 4.2 sufficient to basically provide them with a hold harmless, or how does it actually work out for our air service providers with that 4.2 million?
Sure, Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Rothfuss. So, ultimately, we were expecting to spend some money on air service. And what we did when we started kind of running the numbers was how much is COVID-19 going to cost us over this 10-month period? Should we fly a relatively similar schedule to what we anticipated flying? And what we came up with was that we would end up expending about $4.2 million more than had things continued on the trajectory that they were going on. When you did have record-setting months in Gillette and Sheridan, Riverton, how much more was COVID going to cost us? And that kind of that difference was at $4.2 million. In the mechanics of it, we take a 2/3 of the invoice is billed directly to the capacity purchase agreement, and then we split the remaining third between the city, the community partner and the state at a 60-40% share.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator.
Yep, follow up. Thank you. So, we know that there are separate programs aside from the CARES funds that we received that were specifically programmed to target air service at the federal level. And I am curious whether, those help to support this independently, or if the way that our capacity purchase agreement contract is in place, we're independent from those funds and we have the obligation either way under our CPA.
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Rothfuss, if I understand it correctly, are you referring to the Essential Air Service Program then for the federal funds?
Mr. Chairman, no, it was my understanding, and I could be wrong, but I was under the impression that within the CARES Act, exclusive from state share funds, there were funds to help support airlines and air service, not the traditional federal funds, but specific to COVID.
Mr. Burke?
Yes, Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Rothfuss. Yeah, I think what you were referring to is the airlines had some sort of payroll protection kind of thing in order to keep pilots and flight attendants on staff. So this way, when the recovery happened, that they were not laid off and they're able to to fly again. Yeah, this came to the state kind of pool of CARES Act funds, and then we were given permission from the governor's office to use it from that. That was the payroll protection for the airlines was separate.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, a quick follow-up. I was just wondering if they ended up augmenting each other, if there was, because again, you've got two sources that are theoretically both then supporting our airlines, and how they interacted, and it, I'm getting the impression that they really didn't, which is fine.
Go ahead, Mr. Burke, if you can.
Mr. Co-Chair, Senator Rothfuss, ultimately it's an invoice that has to be paid by either the state or the local communities for services provided by SkyWest. And these are actual aircraft that fly and burn fuel and pilots that are paid. So they're actively, it's an act of service that required an invoice, on our end. So we were going to pay it one way or the other, unless we discontinued service entirely.
Gotcha. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. A different question, if I may, one more.
Sure.
Thank you.
A 3:30 call I got to get on. So.
Yep. All right. Last one for me then. We talked as we were putting this capacity purchase agreement together that we were going to start with a certain number of cities and airports in the state, and that there was the possibility of expansion and extension. And I just wanted to hear some thoughts on that. And it might be too early, but if there's anything to add there.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. We're always having conversations with the airlines. The funny thing about air service development is it's never enough. You always want more. The communities want more. They want more destinations, more flights. So we're continuing to look at that with our airline partners.
Okay. All right. Any further questions for Mr. Burke? All right. Well, thank you. Mr. Olson, you were going to update us on the impact study. Give us an update on where that's at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I may, just to provide a little more context for Senator Rothfuss, as part of the CARES Act, the Congress did set aside about $10 billion that was to go to airports through the US DOT. So that money was really used strictly by the airports, and per their revenue use policies, they're not able to use that for air service. Now, it was far more flexible than FAA money typically is. So they were able to use it for a variety of things such as operations, maintenance, capital improvements, but it did not have any benefit to air service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Olson. And it's my understanding that roughly half of those funds went to Cody. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, about 18 million out of 49.5. So you're close.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So moving on, Mr. Chairman, to our aviation economic impact study update. As you as the committee may recall from our update to you all last year, this time in about May 2019, we started working on this project, and we spent almost an entire year studying and surveying activities at our airports and that are supported by our airports, travelers that come in, general aviation users that use the airports. So we spent almost a year doing that and ended that up shortly before COVID really hit hard. So we spent that time surveying, and then over the course of this summer, we've worked on the analysis of this project. And really what this project does is it documents the many ways that aviation and airports support economic activity in the state, and also how they create economic activity in the state or impacts. We studied 34 public use airports. The airports that did not have paved runways were not included in the report. Their economic impact is very small. Our airport sponsors, they really value this report. It provides them a nice tool to help their local decision makers, as well as the state, understand the value of the airports in both locally and for the state as well. In this particular report, we did include a couple of things that are interesting. The first one is we're going to do an update on our return on investment study for the Air Service Enhancement Program, and those projects and routes that are flown under that program. And so that's, we'll have some updated numbers on that ROI, as well as we're going to do a baseline study on drones or UAS in the state, so that we can understand going forward how that industry, how it's growing and how it's impacting our economic activity in the state. And then in addition, one thing that we've included on this one is, we only conduct this study probably every 5 to 7 years. And so the numbers tend to get a bit old. And so we've also had the folks that are doing this for us include a calculator that'll help us try to keep those numbers a little bit more fresh between when we do the studies. So we're on schedule. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. We were hoping to have it done by the end of the year, and I think we're going to beat that by a few weeks. So stay tuned. We'll be rolling that out here in the next month and a half. And the numbers, if you look back at 2013, there was the total economic activity was right around 1.3 billion annually, and the number is significantly higher than that. So there's been a lot of good work and a lot of good things that have happened because of aviation in the state over the last 7 years. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I had on the economic impact study, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. I'm a little bit of a geek. I read those studies and look through them, so I'll look forward to it. Yeah. Committee, any further questions for the department? Okay, well, we appreciate you coming before Minerals, giving us the update, and thank you very much. So, committee, with that, before we adjourn, though, I do wish to recognize Representative Crank. This will be his last Minerals meeting, and unfortunately, he'll be leaving the Brotherhood of the House of Representatives. And Representative Crank, I very much have appreciated your insight and your unique perspective on the world. And as with all legislators, we all bring a little bit of ourselves in, and that's the whole idea. And you know, I'm going to miss you as well. And anyway, I don't know if you have a couple words for the committee or not, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have appreciated getting to know people from around the state, and it's been a pleasure to serve for House District 18. You know, I think I kind of look at it as that old adage, something along the lines of, "Though for the grace of the voters go I," and so there I'll go that way. But respect the process, and I know you folks all have a big task ahead of you. I wish you all well, and I know we're in good hands. So thank you, and I have really enjoyed the process and being in the legislature.
And especially being on the Minerals Committee, right? All right. Well, yeah, thank you. And we wish you the very best, and hope to see you around in other capacities, most definitely. Well, committee, I don't have anything further on the agenda. Mr. Fuller, is there anything more?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, committee, that was go ahead, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to compliment you on extending day to day, making it into a 8-hour day. So you did a good job with getting every little detail out. So good job.
It's my goal. Is been a very interesting, a unique interim. This committee started doing some of the heavy lifting on the CARES Act relief funds, and quite frankly, the work that we did was essential for that getting through the special session. And there was a lot of time put in by this committee, all the committee members. We also have a lot of legislation that's been very well worked that'll come up in the next session, however that transpires. And again, I want to thank all of you for your hard work and pushing through and doing a very good job for the state of Wyoming. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting, and thank you.